What is up? Welcome back to another edition of the PFF podcast. I'm Mike Renner. Joining me, as always, fellow analyst Sam Monson. And once again, it is the doldrums of the NFL offseason, the spot between free agency and the draft. We're getting a little closer to the draft here now. It's coming up a little bit, but the draft podcast that we do is later in the week. This one's more NFL still focused. And the only NFL news of relevancy comes at the running back position once again, and it's Marshawn Lynch contemplating coming out of retirement. Supposedly was in Oakland talking with them, has expressed interest also in going to New England to pay for the Patriots. Sam, this is Marshawn Lynch knows how to make headlines. Is this the real deal, or is this just him spitballing coming back to the game again?
I think the Patriots thing is probably just spin for whatever reason. I think the Raiders thing, though, is legit. I think that he would come back to play for the Raiders for, a season. I think he probably got the itch to play during a year where he wasn't on the field. The Raiders could clearly use a running back like Marshawn Lynch behind that pretty beastly offensive line. I think that would be a really fun combination. The thing that Lynch brings that is ridiculous, is peerless in the NFL, is his ability to break tackles. You cannot bring that guy to the ground. And the best example of that is if you just look at the broken tackle statistics since 2013, Marshawn Lynch leads all NFL running backs by 66 broken tackles. And Marshawn Lynch didn't play last year. And not only that, but the year before that, he only played 8 games. Yeah. So, it's absolutely ridiculous how far he leads the field by. Like, 66 missed tackles would have led the league this year in terms of broken tackles. Like, that was 8 more than Jay Ajayi managed this year. You cannot bring Marshawn Lynch to the ground.
Yeah, it really was shocking last year when he did retire, because he just seemed like one of those guys where you're going to have to drag him off the football field because it seemed like he loved the game that much, loved just running over other human beings that much. Then all of a sudden he does retire. And that's why there were rumors that during the season last year that he might be coming back. But I do think that this is the real deal, and that at some point he will be, either if it's Oakland, if it's New England, wants to come back and play for another championship. I just think he needs someone to basically woo him, them to say, hey, you're our starter, you're getting X amount of carries, you're getting a full time. I don't think he's going to be the type of guy who's going to swallow his pride, come back to split some time like Adrian Peterson might end up having to do.
Yeah, but I love the fit with him in that Oakland offense. If Derek Carr gets back even close to what he was last season before he went down hurt, the weapons they've got, even ignoring anything they've added this offseason, the Crabtree, Amari Cooper dynamic at receiver, that offensive line is fantastic. It's way better than anything Lynch has seen in Seattle in recent memory. That has the potential to be a ridiculous offense that's virtually unstoppable.
Yeah, I was going to say the biggest part about that, what makes it as scary as it does, you have that offensive line. And the scheme that they run is, this gap scheme where it's not a lot of negative play. So basically you're getting, with Lynch behind that line, him falling forward, you're getting 4 yards a pop, it seems like, every play. And then maybe he'll get some gravy on top of that. But Lynch that'll just demoralize his defensive coordinators, because you have no recourse when a guy's doing that to you. You just have to swallow your medicine and put more guys in the box. And then you get killed by Amari Cooper down the field. So I think that would be huge for Oakland, because I'll be honest, I didn't think Latavius Murray last season was anything special at the running back position. The guys behind him, DeAndre Washington and Jalen Richard, they were better when they were in the game. So I didn't think that what the talent they had in that backfield was anything good. So if Lynch is even 95 to 90% of the former self that we saw from him back in 2014 when he had that playoff run, where I think he broke 29 tackles over the course of 4 games in the playoffs, or 3 games in the playoffs. That was something ridiculous. If he's anywhere close to that, I think that offense immediately becomes a contender for the top offense in the NFL.
Yeah, one more statistic for the broken tackles that I think is fantastic. Jay Ajayi had the best rate, not just the most number of broken tackles in the NFL last year, but did it at the best rate. So Jay Ajayi broke a tackle once every 4.5 carries last season. Marshawn Lynch, for his career, has broken a tackle once every 4.4 carries. So his entire career average is better than the best mark of 2016. That's just how ridiculous he is in terms of avoiding tackles.
Yeah, absolute freak. So I'm excited. Hopefully he comes back. Game's more fun when Lynch is involved. I'll just say that. Let's move on, though. Last week we broke down the AFC, the biggest need for every team heading into the draft. This week we're switching sides of the coin, going to the NFC, starting off with the Dallas Cowboys. Sam, the number one seed in the NFC playoffs last year, didn't end up winning a game in the playoffs when all was said and done. What position do they need to put them over the hump, get them to the Super Bowl this upcoming year?
They've got to add a cornerback. They've allowed the entire cornerback stable, more or less, to hit free agency. Like, a couple of teams have done that recently. And for Dallas, I can kind of see why you let those guys go, but it's not like they were keeping on the bench a series of ridiculously impressive looking corners. So Orlando Scandrick, I think, is still a very good slot guy. Brown showed some interesting games last year, but I don't know if you can rely on him being an every game starter. And Nolan Carroll,
still was only a 6th rounder, so he was good, but it's 6th rounder, you just don't know.
And Nolan Carroll coming in from Philadelphia just isn't going to fix that. You need a number one corner there, and they don't have one yet.
I will go a different route. I agree that their secondary just got decimated. I can't believe they let all the guys walk that they did. I thought they were going to have a chance at one of them at retaining someone like Maurice Claiborne. They didn't. But I think they need an edge rusher. Randy Gregory is basically, I'd say at this point, done in the NFL. It seems like DeMarcus Lawrence was not really that guy a season ago that we thought he'd be after a good second year in 2015 when he came back from the suspension. Just wasn't anything special. I think they need to pressure the passer. They were in the bottom 5 in terms of opponent quarterbacks under pressure, in terms of pressuring opposing quarterbacks. Excuse me, that was a mouthful. But they just did not get pressure on opposing quarterbacks, and we saw it when Aaron Rodgers tore him apart in the playoffs. Basically, he had all day to throw for a good portion of that game, and that's what did them in when it was all said and done. So I think in a draft as deep as at edge rusher, I think there will be a good one that can step in right away waiting for them at the end of the first round.
Yeah, I think there's a few different positions Dallas could go. I don't think this is a team it's interesting. It's a very good roster and there's a lot of very good players. There's a lot of talent on that team, but there's some clear holes that need to be addressed as well, which you don't necessarily see with some of these better teams.
All right, on to the second place in that division. The New York Giants had a huge turnaround a season ago. How do they continue that momentum, turn around even more in 2017?
I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit, but I'm going to be really disappointed if you don't take the other guy that I would be considering. So they desperately need a new left tackle. Eric Flowers just isn't the answer. They've given it a shot for a couple of years now. The second year, I think flirted with it for about a game and a half. It looked like he turned it all around and then went back to being Eric Flowers. And it was, Eric Flowers playing left tackle it's just not going well. So, it was 4 sacks last year, which doesn't sound too bad. But when you add that to 59, total pressures, 13 penalties, it's just, it's getting the quarterback killed. It's not a viable starting left tackle. So they need to roll that dice again and give it another shot.
Well, and the thing is, no one was happier that Eric Flowers was abysmal last year than Bobby Hart, because Bobby Hart, the right tackle, was one of the bottom 5 right tackles in the league by our grading, and he basically got a pass for it because Eric Flowers was just one of the worst I've never seen a left tackle have so many reps where he doesn't even make contact.
Having said that,
gets beaten.
Bobby Hart was the guy that got replaced. DJ Fluker got signed. You would assume he's probably going to have a good shot to start at right tackle. So
are they going to keep him at tackle? I
would think so. Yeah. John Jay played okay, didn't he? And Justin Pugh's going to stay at left guard. So I would say that Fluker, if he's got a shot to start, it's going to be at right tackle.
I'm not plugging Fluker in and feeling confident about him either. That was the thing.
No. Well, as long as they don't, plug him in at left tackle, then that would be a competition you don't want to see happen.
I have to go tackle as well. I just don't see how you can roll into the season with that as your starting lineup.
Go Eli.
You just need. I would have loved to go on Eli. Would have loved to go on linebacker as well, but Lord knows they'll never address linebacker in New York, so that's just not worth it. But yeah, the thing is, if there was a quarterback they could get, that would be an upgrade from Eli that I knew would be so. I'd say quarterback, but I don't think any of the rookies are going to immediately upgrade over him year one.
Well, that's true. Yeah, it's probably not a great year to require a new quarterback. Though, having said that, it's not like they're going to do it straight away anyway, so it's potentially not a bad year to draft one in the first round and have him sit for a year.
That is true. I would, if they did draft him, I would be pleasantly surprised if I was a Giants fan. I'll just say that. All right, on to the Redskins, who looked like I was a fan of their offense a season ago. I made that known, but their defensive side of the ball definitely had some failings. I went cornerback for them, even though they still have Josh Norman. I just don't think we saw what happened when they had Josh Norman shadowing and what happened to Rashad Breeland at times. I just think you need to add talent to that cornerback room at this point. Even with Kendall Fuller a season ago, he didn't show enough year one that I wouldn't draft another one.
Yeah, I could see corner. I think they still desperately need defensive line help. They added Stacey McGee in free agency. I think that's a nice rotational body. It's not a guy that's going to fix the problem. They still, I think, especially with letting Chris Baker walk in this free agency period, which is strange. I mean, it's not, if it was a case that they got priced out of the market and he went somewhere else, fair enough, but it sounded like they didn't even want him. He signed for peanuts, and he was their best defensive lineman. I mean, assuming you count Ryan Kerrigan as an edge rushing linebacker.
Mm-hmm. No, I get on board with anywhere along that defense, to be honest. I just think they need talent everywhere. And like you said, defensive line, definitely. If Ziggy Hood, they're throwing him out for 700 snaps again, that's a problem. Like that. Yeah. I don't care what team you are, that's a problem. So, yeah, I can get on board with that for the Redskins. All right, on to the last place team from the NFC East a season ago, the Philadelphia Eagles. They addressed wide receiver to some degree in free agency, which was the headline glaring need heading into that, signing Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith. What do you think it is now at this point? What would you say is their biggest need?
It's definitely cornerback. I mean, that could 100%. Be literally, it's almost the only position you could possibly choose for the Eagles. Everything else actually is looking in reasonable shape. Cornerback is in desperate trouble. Even if, guys from last year take a step forward, which I'm not exactly confident in.
Yeah, no, I mean, they were so bad a season ago, did not add anyone. Patrick Robinson is not, he's been a nickel sort of cornerback his entire career, it seems. He's not a guy going to solve that cornerback room. I'd say you need at least two cornerbacks in this draft if you're the Eagles. Yeah. I just think it's that desperate of a need.
Jalen Mills was one of the most frustrating players from a statistical point of view last year because he was grading terribly consistently all year long, gave up more than 63% of passes thrown or targets thrown his way to be caught, allowed over 800 yards, but only allowed one touchdown, which was weird. I mean, and that touchdown came late in the season. I mean, for a long time in the year, he was one of like three guys that hadn't allowed a touchdown all season long. And I really wanted to use that statistic throughout the year. But he was the guy ruining it because it was him, Talib, and somebody else. And it kept screwing up my stat.
And the thing is, with how good that defensive line is now, even adding Tim, who he dropped the MY. Did he? Tim Jernigan. He did. He, in fact, did. I said after he got traded, I said, how can you trust a grown man named Timmy? And he changed it like multiple days later. He said, call me Tim. But so even after adding him, they have one of the most dangerous defensive lines. They can pressure with four as well as anyone in the NFL right now. You just need something on the back end. They were so good at the beginning of the year last year, that defense was, because the cornerbacks were just playing at least all right, just some average play out of them, and you can field a really nice defense there. But right now they're not even close to average play there. So that's, like I said, huge need for them. Chalk that up if they don't go cornerback round one. I'll be surprised. On to the NFC West, where we go to the Seattle Seahawks, winners of the division. And, I mean, another one. Do we even talk about it? It's offensive line.
It is. And it's always offensive line. And yet, they never do it.
Well, I mean, they did it last year, but they don't do it the correct way.
Well, yeah, even last year, yeah. I mean,
they do it in the backwards.
But this is a team that just has no money committed to that offensive line. Like it's like 8 million or something for the entire unit. It's ludicrous when you compare it to like the Raiders, who have, you know, a huge amount of cash tied up in that line because they did it all through free agency. And it's clearly the biggest problem on this team. I mean, they can still win and win the division with the offensive line as it is, but it seems like everybody's taking that as validation for them going about it this way, as opposed to, but what if the line was okay? Like, you know, we're able to win this number of games and win the division and actually challenge despite one of the worst lines out there. What if this line was just average?
Yeah. I mean, that would be nice to have an average offensive line. They won't, I don't think, this year again, unless guys take some pretty darn big steps forward. They signed Luke Jokel, and I don't think there's any reason to suggest he's going to be the answer at left tackle. He's
already a massive upgrade. I mean, that's how bad this line was.
But that's the thing. Like, that's huge. Still. So I still think they have to, even if there might not be offensive linemen in this class that are day one impact starters. It's fairly weak in terms of the tackle position. I think there's a couple at guard that I'd say could step in right away and play, but I still think they got to do something, right? They have to at least try at all on the offensive line in the first round here, right?
I would think so. I mean, this is an interesting team as well because Sherman apparently is on the trade block. If he gets traded, that suddenly gives them a really thin-looking cornerback group. You know, from having the Legion of Boom back there to suddenly hang on corner looks really weak if you take Sherman out of that group. You've got Shed as your number one, you've got Lane as presumably the number two stepping out, and you've got to try and find someone to cover the slot or to be the third corner. That becomes interesting. The other weird wrinkle about Seattle is that they now have 2 of the top 5 picks from that 2013 draft in Jokel, and they just signed Deion Jordan.
Good thing that 2013 draft was so good, right? Yeah. That was like an all-time bad draft. They got Eddie Lacy too. They signed Arthur Brown from that draft as well. They're just trying to revitalize that draft all on their own.
And which is weird because they basically sacrificed their first round pick in that draft to trade for Percy Harvin, and that didn't exactly work out either. So whatever it was about that 2013 draft, it was not friendly to the Seahawks.
He's still chasing. That's the gambling term. He's chasing the 2013 draft still. Let's move on to the Cardinals, second in that division. Again, I think this is another obvious one. I want to hear what you have to say, though, but I think this one, again, clear cut.
I think this is another team that pretty much needs offensive line help. That offensive line was pretty bad a year ago. I think it'll get better. They had some guys that were banged up, and it couldn't get worse. But I think they still need a pretty major injection of young talent on that offensive line. Let's see what other positions they could do.
I was going to say D-line. I just don't think they have. I mean, I know Robert Kimdichis is coming back this season, but everyone else on that defensive line was kind of getting held together by the fact that Calais Campbell was so good, so far and away one of the best players at his position. Everyone else really sort of replacement level play we saw a season ago. So that's worrisome. Losing that large of a that much value along the defensive line. Someone's got to step up. I think they could use a nose tackle as well, a true nose tackle at some point in this draft. So I think they could use a handful of bodies along that D-line.
It's definitely asking a lot for Kimdichis to step up. They're helped by the fact that they have a pair of edge rushers that are pretty useful. So they really need, one really disruptive interior presence, and that line should be fine. So I definitely take your point that I think they could do with depth there. They could do with two or three more bodies that can be solid rotational guys. But if Kimdichis steps up and being their first round pick last year, you would want them to, they wouldn't be in bad shape.
All right, we'll agree to disagree. I think they need more bodies. But we'll move on to the LA Rams. What do you see as their biggest need?
Good work, by the way, dodging the Los Angeles thing. We've had a year now, so we should be.
I know that one. It's just because it's up on my screen. It says Los Angeles. I probably would have said St. Louis if it had been that way.
So we probably can't go quarterback, right? Because it's only been a year for Jared Goff. Can we kill him off already?
Come on, you can't. You can't do that to PFF.
PFF grade.
All I'll say is I think that the not knowing where the sun rises thing was like kind of laughed at, but that to me was like a pretty big deal.
Seriously.
The fact that a quarterback doesn't know where the sun rises, that's kind of like the attention to detail sort of stuff. Like you would want your quarterback. Like when I saw that, I was like, oh shit. I am out on Jared Goff. Like all the stuff I thought about him in the draft kind of just not say I wasn't completely out. I was just like, that's not good.
Yeah,
but
look,
from what I've seen, still not good.
Quarterback or no, when a guy doesn't know where the sun rises, I'm going to have some questions about that guy's mental faculties. And you know, there are players out there that have proven in the past that football intelligence is not the same thing as, you know, general intelligence, but still, that's going to raise some questions, is all I'm saying. And if he answers those questions, that's fine. But Jared Goff didn't. Jared Goff looked horrendous and had no business being on the field in year one, which is concerning for a guy that was, you know, everyone talked about Carson Wentz as the guy that was going to need polish and going to need time on the bench. And he looked dramatically more ready than Goff did. And even he didn't look particularly ready. So, you know, quarterback at the moment looks like a need, but they're obviously not going to draft one in the first round.
Yeah.
Weirdly, wide receiver is still a need, even though they're just throwing a ton of money at it.
That was exactly going to be mine. They have, what, like $20+ million committed to Tavon Austin, Robert Woods, and they still have arguably a bottom 5 receiving core in the entire NFL at the moment.
I don't think either of those guys has had more
shouldn't be possible.
Like 800 yards in a season, which is, I mean, that's like, that's not a large figure. You know, it's not like we're saying a 1,200 yard receiver out there. 800 is not much.
This is why I keep going back to in free agency, people want to, you know, kind of throw money at a problem without ever solving it. That's why I can get on board with paying Ndamukong Suh $18 million a year. I can get on board with paying Von Miller that much money because those guys are sure things going to change a pass rush. Guys like Alshon Jeffrey, $14 million, are going to be number one receivers. If you pay Robert Woods and Tavon Austin 8 and 8 together, you're paying them more than Alshon Jeffrey, whereas I'd rather just have Alshon Jeffrey and, you know, three Jags along with them. That's going to impact my passing game more. So, I think it's still wide receiver.
How much is 800 yards? Not that much. In 2015, two players had 1,000 more yards than 800 yards. You know, two guys had 1,800 yards in 2015, and neither of those top two Rams receivers, I think I'm right in saying, have had an 800-yard season.
Just ugly stuff there. Ugly stuff. All right, let's move on to even uglier stuff. The San Francisco 49ers. Not to hate on 49ers fans. They know that the roster is depleted. I put anywhere for this. Literally, you can draft any position if you're the 49ers, except for the position that Solomon Thomas and Jonathan Allen play, which they already have DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead. You can't keep drafting that same position because you got that already. Any other position, though.
You've now got 3 of those if you draft it.
Yeah.
And yeah, you really can't. It's weird in that you would have that many guys, and you know, you say you can never have too many pass rushers, you can never have too many cover guys. Or I think you probably can have too many of those guys because you just can't get that position on the field. If they were all edge rushers, there would be something you could do. All legitimate edge rushers. But all that kind of weird tweener interior presence.
Yeah, there's just no versatility there.
Yeah,
like you have to line up over a guard or over a tackle, and you can only put 2 of those guys in the field at once, max.
Yeah. And we saw last year what happens when you don't have the anchor. You know, they had a couple of those guys in the field at all times and no nose tackle at any time, and teams would just destroy that defensive line. They would just grind it off the line of scrimmage and guarantee yardage.
Hey, they signed Earl Mitchell, though, who cannot hold up to double team to save his life, so they're good. They're good at nose tackle.
Earl Mitchell, who was just miscast every time he's ever been on the field for a defense in the NFL.
As a starter. He was miscast as a starter. All right. 49ers, anywhere. That's the bottom line. Just except for Solomon Thomas or Jonathan Allen. All right. On to the NFC North. NFC Green Bay Packers, your champions of the NFC North season ago. Another one that you can break out the highlighter and chalk it up. It's cornerback.
Yeah. But at the very least, one of those guys has lost the kind of lost the goodwill that they'd built up the year before as potential starters going forward. I think they would have been hoping that both those guys would kick on in 2016, 2017. They'd have, one of the best young cornerback stables in the NFL. But the way they all played last year, at least one of those guys has got to lose their starting job, if not both of them. And you've got to start trying again.
Well, I would, honestly, after what you saw from season ago, I realized that they both struggled. Quentin Rollins and Damaris Randall had some injuries throughout the year, whatever. But they did not show any sort of promise to where I'm not going to do the exact same thing I did in 2015 and draft a cornerbacks in round 1 and 2 again, because it was that drastic of a need by the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's the interesting thing there is that you're asking a lot of Ted Thompson to basically go, yeah, you know what, that's already not working out. We're going to blow it up and start again, which is, it's always one of those things that's, the Seahawks are very good at admitting quickly when they've made a mistake or when something's definitely not going to work out. Most teams really struggle with doing that and hate making that call. It wouldn't be something I'd expect Ted Thompson to do.
I will say, for a team that made the NFC Championship game last year, they have a lot of positions they could go for also. Like I said, they could go cornerbacks round 1 and round 2, but they also need upgrades at linebacker. They could use an edge rusher. They could use a guard as well. So I don't think this is that they're limited to cornerback, but definitely some needs there for the Green Bay Packers.
Anywhere on defense would not.
But anywhere on defense would be nice. Yeah. On to the Detroit Lions, second place team in the NFC North the season ago. What do you see as their biggest need?
This is an interesting team because they kind of traded offensive linemen. They shipped out a couple and brought in a couple. They still desperately need a left guard, even though they have Laken Tomlinson, a former first-round pick, who they still want to kind of realize the potential they thought they saw in him.
And Graham Glasgow.
They have a glass cow. I don't know that the glass cow is going to do an awful lot at left guard, but I think they still need a left guard from somewhere. I would at least draft one and make that a 3-way competition rather than a 2-way competition where neither of the guys looks capable of winning it. And then they're another team that I think they couldn't necessarily do with it anywhere on defense, but certainly anywhere in the front 7 and probably cornerback as well.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. This is one of the few teams where I'll say I think linebacker is a very big need because it looks like they may be starting Paul Warloo.
Oh, dear.
Or that he may be atop the depth chart coming into the season. So that immediately is a red flag that goes up to say, hey, we need to address the linebacker position. So I think I could get on board with them drafting a linebacker as well. All right, on to the Minnesota Vikings, who I wanted to say offensive line, but they they have a starter now at every position, even if it's not a good starter. I don't think they necessarily go out and draft offensive linemen because they've paid guys now.
So this was
every point up and down the line.
I wrote up their draft needs for the website today, and it kind of bummed me out because every position that I think they need, they kind of address. They just address badly. So they brought in a couple of offensive linemen. They brought in Riley Reif and Mike Remmers to be their new tackles. I mean, Riley Reif at his best is okay. Mike Remmers at his best is a little less than okay. It's definitely an upgrade over TJ Clemmings and Jeremiah Styles, who is still potentially slated to start at right guard. But I don't know, it's not good. I think they still need a guard. I think if they're going to target a lineman in the draft, it's going to be a guard. You've got to assume that the 2 free agents are going to start. However ill-advised that may prove to be. But Sarles is still penciled in, I think, to start a guard. They could definitely stand to bring in some competition there. I think they also need a defensive tackle now with the rumors about Sharif Floyd's knee injury or the complications from his knee injury potentially being career-ending.
Yeah, the funny thing is the Vikings did almost exactly the same thing as they did a season ago when they brought in Alex Boone and Andre Smith, and they're like, oh, they plugged holes, but they didn't really plug, those holes are still pretty damn leaky. So that's how I feel about their offensive line still. There's not a real quality starter there outside of maybe Joe Berger at center that I'd feel comfortable with heading into the season. But
Burger's really old.
But are you? But that's the thing is, are you going to upgrade? Or are you going to spend a draft pick to try to upgrade on? I'm not too sure. I think they could also use a running back in this draft.
Yes.
I'm not going to say it's their biggest need, but like I mentioned with Latavius Murray earlier, I've never been high on him as a starter in the NFL. Jerick McKinnon, they're actually very similar in terms of both very athletic guys who don't necessarily have vision and can't really break tackle. So I think they could use a running back in that backfield. I think that would help a little to get some of the run game going behind the offensive line that might not be run blocking well, but I think a running back would do them some as well.
Yeah, running back was my third need for them in the article. The problem, of course, is that because of the Sam Bradford deal, they don't have a first-round pick, so they don't pick until 48 in the draft unless they make some trades happen.
Yeah, and then going with your only pick being in the first 2 rounds being a running back that's a tough sell.
Or a guard.
This day and age. Yeah.
You're left with this situation where any hole you need to plug is going to look almost... You're going to be reluctant to do it at 48 when it's your only pick in the first 2 rounds.
That is true. It's a good point. All right, on to the last team in the NFC North, the Chicago Bears. What do you got for them?
Everybody needs cornerbacks. Which actually is a good year to do it because
for them too.
This is a really good cornerback draft. But it's just as well that it is because everybody seems to need them. I think this isn't a terrible cornerback roster. You know, I think Prince Amukamara is not a bad player. He's just a guy that I think frustrates teams because when he gets beaten, it tends to be bad. He's also kind of fragile, a bit injury prone, and anytime a former first round pick is not the guy that you wanted him to be, he's always going to have almost a slightly shorter rope once teams start kind of kicking him around the league. So, but I think he's a capable starter. He's a guy they can have in there. You know, then they've got Kyle Fuller. They got Kyle. I'm confusing between the troop.
Kendall's
Fuller.
The Redskins. Yes, but Fuller fam.
Yes, and so, you know, I think it's not a disastrous group, but it's a group I think that they do need to upgrade.
Yeah, Kyle Fuller's in that sort of almost similar to Prince Amukamara, but I think a little even worse, and where you're kind of in purgatory with the first-round pick who showed promise at times, but continually gets beaten still, and this isn't, you know, it didn't live up to his draft status at this point, but how long do you wait for him? Because heading into year 4 now, do you extend that 5th-year option and keep sending him back out there without addressing the position? I think at this point you've seen enough to where you say, all right, we bring in a guy to bring in some competition to try and upgrade. I think if Marshawn Lattimore is there on the board at 3, they would have a very difficult time passing him up.
Yeah, and then they have a couple of positions or a couple of position groups that really hinge on the development of young players. So they really need Leonard Floyd to take a step forward, and they really need Kevin White to show something because he's their number 1 wide receiver.
I was going to say I could even throw wide receiver on there after that because they seem to have Kevin White and then maybe about 5 number 3 wide receivers is about how I describe that wide receiver room at the moment. So on to the NFC South, last division here. Your representative from the NFC in the Super Bowl, the Falcons. What pushes them over the edge to Super Bowl champions next year, if that's even possible?
This is an interesting team because obviously they were in the Super Bowl, so it's a pretty good roster to start with. They added a guy in Dontari Poe who has been underwhelming, but I'm intrigued to see in that defense. You know, it's a totally different scheme for him. He wants to prove on a 1-year deal that he can be more than just a run stuffer. You know, if he's given the license to, he can get upfield and actually rush the passer a bit, which I'm intrigued by. I don't necessarily disagree with him, and I'm curious to see if he can actually prove it. And then that defense was so young at so many key positions that it's really about how many of them can take a step forward. But if you're going to add players, I think it is on defense. I think there's you know, pretty much anyone could use the competition, but there's no giant glaring hole in my eyes, except maybe linebacker.
Yeah, I would say the real holes or the real positions where I'd say on this roster definitely need upgrading. 1, linebacker. Devondre Campbell didn't show me enough to where I'd say that to where I'd know that he's as a 4th-round pick going to develop into a quality starter. The other edge rusher, someone across from Vic Beasley to also get some pressure. Adrian Claiborne, Brooks Reed just aren't scaring any offensive tackle in the league right now. And then the last one I'd probably say is right guard, where Chris Chester wasn't good, and Hugh Thornton, who's come in from Indianapolis, is not better. So they need someone at right guard. So any of those three positions, I'm going to call it a tie in my mind between those three.
I'm all aboard the Ben Garland train. Any man that plays both sides of the ball, I'm a huge fan of.
You love going both ways. All right, on to the Bucks. Tampa Bay, I have the only one I think out of all the 32, I can't quite remember off the top of my head what I did for the AFC, but I think this is the only one that I'm going to say safety is the biggest need.
Is safety that big a need for them?
What am I missing?
Well, I mean, I don't think
they're going to throw out Chris Conte again.
Yeah, but Chris Conte's wow, are they gonna...
I mean, it's a pretty big need. They signed what? So Chris Conte, J.J. Wilcox, Ryan Smith. Is that safety room? They lost Bradley McDougald.
Tandy.
So what position do you have?
Well, there's another team that I think needs some offensive line help. I think it's time to give up Donovan Smith.
It is.
Much so people seem to like him for reasons that I can't quite grasp.
No, that was a lost cause from the beginning.
Yeah, just given up many pressures and many penalties. And it's not doing them any favors. So, yeah, I would say it's time to move on there. I think it's time to get a running back as well. I think Doug Martin's just been too inconsistent. You can't rely on him going forward. It's time to start again on that one.
Just so inconsistent. It's unbelievable to me how, he gets a nick, he gets, his hamstring gets a little tight, and he turns into the worst running back in the NFL. It makes no sense to me because at his best, he's like a top 5 running back sort of talent and what he can do in terms of pass game as a receiving threat and running as a home run threat out of the backfield. But you just don't know which guy you're going to get year in and year out, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, and more to the point, it's now been more of not the guy than it has been the guy. You know, if you could get 2015 Doug Martin every single year, you would be set. But you've had that guy once in a few games as a rookie. And outside of that, it's been bad.
Yeah, odd career for Doug Martin. But I can agree. I can get on board with running back. I'm going to say safety, though. I'm going to stick with my original pick. All right, on to the New Orleans Saints, who another team where just defense in general,
always
in the general sense, is nice. But, oh my God, how bad does that Stephen Anthony pick look at the moment? I can't believe he just couldn't. I just can't believe he's been as bad as he has, to be honest.
Well, New Orleans is where linebackers go to die. It's something happens
I was gonna say
when they go into Louisiana, and it just goes horribly wrong. Which is interesting because Manti Te'o was already terrible, so it's going to be impressive to see what kind of depths he can plumb in this this defense that tends to destroy the great.
I was gonna say I do respect their free agent strategy of signing every bad linebacker in the NFL. Craig Robertson, Donnell Ellerbe, AJ Klein, Manti Te'o, just sign the worst linebackers through free agency and see if one of them just has a career renaissance somehow.
Having just done the same trick with James Laurinaitis and
James Laurinaitis as well. Yeah,
I mean, what are they? No.
It makes no sense. Like, draft and develop a linebacker.
But then, of course,
plugging in free agents.
Stephon Anthony, and that went about as bad as everything else. It's just linebackers. It's just, whatever it is, the New Orleans Saints do not get on well with linebackers.
They have to draft Reuben Foster, right? Like, that has to be where he goes. There's no.
What if they kill him as well? What if they draft Reuben Foster and he sucks?
So that's actually a great experiment. He has to go there, and if he does suck, there's actually something. Something's actually going on, because that's one of the best linebacker prospects I've ever seen.
If he sucks, it's time to start developing defensive schemes with no linebackers in them.
Exactly. You just go
five.
What's after the dime?
5 or something.
The $50, something like that.
It's time to go like a 5-1-5 with the 1 being some kind of strong safety, in the box deal.
Exactly. They are, but yeah, linebacker for sure. New Orleans Saints. All right, on to the team that was your representative from the NFC a season ago.
Man, that went south in a hurry.
And it did go south in a hurry. Your Carolina Panthers, what's their biggest need? How do they turn things around, Sam?
So they could definitely use some offensive line help. The Matt Khalil thing appears to have been a far more team-friendly deal than it first appeared. You know, the headline figures, as they usually are, dramatically flattered the agent as opposed to anything else. So they're kind of giving Matt Khalil a 1 year, give it a shot deal. If he goes back to 2012 Matt Khalil, it looks pretty shrewd. If not, they need a tackle because, you know, there's nobody there that's nailing down that starting spot and actually looking like they're helping Cam Newton more than they're hindering him. They still need wide receivers. They've got a whole bunch of big guys, but
that's what I had written down. Because one, you have no one with any sort of deep speed at this point. Kelvin Benjamin, Devin Funchess as I think Greg Olson's faster than both those guys still. So you have legitimately no sort of deep threats now that they lost Ted Ginn. I was banging the drum for them to get one a season ago because I don't see Kelvin Benjamin as this all-world number one receiver. I think he's very much a possession guy, very much a nice compliment, very much a good red zone threat. But if he's my number one, I think he can be shut down by any sort of cornerback with length. So I'm worried about that. And you need the sort of deep threat to take the top off the defense with Cam Newton, with how good he is down the field. So if I'm them, John Ross, just anyone with speed at the wide receiver position in this class is on my board and on it pretty highly. Their
entire receiving corps has been assembled with the express purpose of not letting Cam Newton overthrow receivers. So
yes.
Kelvin Benjamin is 6'5", Devin Funchess is 6'4", I think Greg Olson is 6'6". They've just got the longest players they can find and thrown them out there and said, right, throw
They're
it high
assembling
if
a
you
basketball
like.
team.
They're going to bring it back. Exactly.
I respect it, but at some point you need something else. So that's the biggest need for the Carolina Panthers. Those are your biggest needs for the entire NFL. Make sure to go back and listen to last week if you're a fan of an AFC team. If you missed it, we hit the AFC a week ago. But now we'll move on to what's grinding Sam's gears this week, our favorite part of the show. He's been hitting good lately, I'll have to say. It's been grinding my gears as well, whatever's been grinding his. So hit me with what you got this week, Sam.
I was thinking about this. I was going to ask you whether I'd used this one already, and then I decided that I just didn't care. Whether I'd used it or not, it was annoying me enough recently that I'm going to break it out again, because the way that people use the word analytics is driving me insane.
You have not, I don't think.
Excellent. Then this will be even better. But if you actually look at what analytics means, right? The dictionary definition of analytics is the method and or science of logical analysis. The secondary definition is the analysis of data or the patterns and other meaningful information gathered from the analysis of data. So all analytics is looking at data and trying to come up with patterns from it, trying to extract information from data, which is what teams have been doing for decades. You know, every time a team has collected the game film of its upcoming opposition for the last 6 games and goes through it trying to find out tendencies, analytics, right? That was happening in the 1960s. This analytics is not this fancy new thing that only existed since, 2008. It's something that's been going on for years, and the only thing that's changing is how much information teams have and how easy it is to access it. So when you get guys like, Tony Grossi from Cleveland,
call him out,
writing these crazy columns about how the Browns front office is being run by Bill Barnwell in his analytics columns, you don't understand what's going on. That isn't what analytics is. Analytics is just the front office and the data guys finding the information they have at hand and applying that to everything that was already happening. It's just one little addition to whatever was already going on.
The trade value chart, Jimmy Johnson's old school trade value chart, was like, that is the definition of analytics. Now, his was even dated himself and not, entirely correct, but he used it to fleece teams in terms of value because he knew more about how valuable each pick was in comparison to everyone else. That's at its heart is what analytics is supposed to do. More information that helps you make better decisions is all it is.
Bill Belichick is up to
people look at that as this genius, coaching move, but it's at its core, that's what analytics is. So
Bill Belichick,
it's always crazy to me that people, it's ignorance.
It's, all this stuff. It's not some fancy buzzword that just means, running through spreadsheets and, plucking up obscure formulas and all that kind of stuff. That is not analytics. It's not sabermetrics. It's not any of this stuff. It is not a new phenomena. The only thing is that we've decided that it's called analytics now and we want to apply it to everything. So people just lose their nut talking about analytics, applying it to this ridiculously narrow band of stuff that it isn't. I mean, like I say, you look at those definitions of analytics and that applies to all football research and preparation that's been done for 60, 70 years. Paul Brown, back with the Cleveland Browns where they didn't suck in the 50s, was working with analytics. This is, it's not a new thing. So stop screwing up the definition of analytics and making it like it's a bad thing.
I do have to say, it does crack me up, though, every time some crotchety sports writer wants to rail against it when they're against pining for the simpler times when it was just,
Yeah, when nobody prepared for anything.
Men were men. Yeah. Now, that's another good grind your gears. That the analytic stuff always just utterly ridiculous. How people misinterpret it. How they just want it to be whatever fits their little bubble. So I can get on board with that.
There we go.
That'll do it for us. Make sure to go to profootballfocus.com. We have team needs articles coming up. We went through our top need. We have the top 3 needs coming up on every team in this draft on our website right now. And make sure to check out Draft Pass, Steve Palazzolo's baby. We use it all the time. It's for our data on the college prospects to make our big board, which is coming out, our horizontal big board coming out here soon. Make sure to check it out, profootballfocus.com/draftpass17. Hope you guys have a good one. We'll talk to you next week.